The world as we know it is changing. The 51st State Project is not mere rhetoric. It is the beginning of a new world order.
That's right. And what you need to understand, right from the start, is that we are not here today to engage in political speculation.
No, this isn't about cable news cycles or, the usual theatrics.
This is a forensic debriefing. We are here to analyze the systematic dismantling of the entire post-1945 geopolitical structure. It's an intelligence assessment, not political commentary.
And that distinction is absolutely vital.
It is. When we talk about the 51st State Project, we are not discussing a standard constitutional amendment. This isn't about adding a star to the flag.
That's the civilian interpretation.
It is, and it's a dangerously naive one. Inside the strategic corridors, the Pentagon, the Eurasia Group, the high-level working groups in Washington, the 51st State is code.
Code for what, exactly?
It's a doctrine of aggressive expansionism. Specifically, it refers to something called regulatory annexation.
Define that for us.
It's the absorption of a sovereign nation's economic and command structures without deploying a single infantry battalion. Not one.
So it's the erasure of the longest undefended border in the world.
It is. For decades, that line between the United States and Canada was a symbol of integrated trade, mutual security, ideological kinship.
And based on intelligence from just the last 60 minutes, that line has been, effectively erased.
It's been replaced by the weaponization of trade. The objective here appears absolute: to force political submission through what can only be described as economic asphyxiation.
We are witnessing a kinetic collision, a collision between two fundamentally incompatible strategic forces.
That's the perfect way to put it. On one side, in the Oval Office, you have the architects.
This would be the Trump administration, trade hawks like Marco Rubio.
Correct. And they are operating under a very strict winner-takes-all doctrine. It's derived directly from zero-sum game theory.
And on the opposing side,
in Ottawa, you have the technocrats. This is led by Mark Carney, the remnants of the Trudeau administration. And they are desperately trying to cling to the old rule book.
The multilateral diplomatic rule book of the late 20th century.
A rule book that's been thrown out. Our mission today is to dissect the three pillars of this takeover: the Manifest Destiny memo, the leaked Golden Dome defense plans, and the catastrophic breakdown of the U.S.-Canada relationship.
Okay, let's strip this down to the theoretical framework first. Before we get into the specific tariffs or the diplomatic insults, we need to understand the why.
The underlying logic.
Yes, why now? Why would the United States threaten a 100% tariff against its single most integrated ally? We have intelligence referencing the analysis of a Professor Jiang. His theories are apparently circulating at the highest levels of the Pentagon. Who is he?
Professor Jiang is a historian, a geopolitical theorist. His work on cyclical history has gained, significant traction within the current administration's strategic planning cells.
And what's the core of his analysis?
It centers on something he calls the end of the 80-year cycle. The theory posits that global orders, the unspoken rules that govern how nations interact, they have a shelf life, an expiration date.
And the current order?
The current order was established in 1945 at Bretton Woods. It created the UN, the IMF, the entire Western alliance structure, where the US provided security guarantees in exchange for market access.
Okay, that cycle is now 81 years old.
Exactly. According to Jiang's framework, it's metabolically dead. It's collapsing under the weight of new power dynamics, and it must be replaced.
And the replacement model is what really matters here. For those 80 years, the United States operated as the global policeman.
It did. It patrolled shipping lanes. It subsidized the defense of Europe and North America. It enforced international law. That was the role.
You're suggesting that role has been formally abandoned?
It's been liquidated. The United States is transitioning from global policeman to global landlord.
Explain that distinction. It's not just semantics.
Not at all. It's operational. A policeman enforces laws to maintain public order. The benefit is for everyone on the street. A landlord, on the other hand, owns the building.
A landlord extracts rent.
A landlord extracts rent. A landlord evicts tenants who violate the lease or, fail to pay market rates. The U.S. is no longer interested in subsidizing the security of nations that do not pay a premium. That is the core of what we're calling the new colonialism.
When we hear colonialism, the mind immediately goes to 19th century maps. We think of troops on the ground, flags planted in soil, direct administration. This seems different.
It's very different.
How does a global landlord colonize a G7 nation like Canada in the 21st century?
You don't need troops in Ottawa. when you control the logistics points, when you control the critical resources. This isn't about occupying territory, it's about occupying the supply chain.
So if you control the flow of goods, data, and energy.
The local government becomes, for all intents and purposes, irrelevant. It's new colonialism, precisely because it strips sovereignty without firing a single shot.
And this control is exerted through something our intelligence sources are calling the trade bazooka. We need to be very specific about what this weapon is. It's not just a tariff, is it?
No. A tariff is a tax. It's used to adjust trade balances. The trade bazooka is the utilization of market access as a weapon of coercion.
Meaning?
The U.S. economy is the prize. Access to the American consumer is now being framed as a privilege, not a right. The strategy here is to demonstrate, in no uncertain terms, that this access can be revoked instantly.
So by threatening to cut off Canada from the U.S. market, Washington isn't trying to protect American steel.
Not at all. It's trying to dictate Canadian domestic and foreign policy.
It sounds like a deliberate injection of instability into the system.
That is exactly what it is. It's strategic disruption, applied through the lens of game theory. In a traditional alliance, the goal is stability. It's predictability. Businesses want to know the rules.
But in this new paradigm,
the U.S. is intentionally introducing chaos. It's questioning borders, floating these massive tariffs, insulting leaders. The chaos forces a winner-takes-all scenario.
what's the end goal of that chaos?
To ensure that in the North American sphere, there is only one survivor, one unified command structure, and that structure is located in Washington, D.C.
This theoretical shift, then, this move from policeman to landlord, it needed a trigger event. It needed something to turn the theory into kinetic action.
And we've identified that catalyst. It occurred last week in Beijing, and it involved Mark Carney. Intelligence circles are referring to this incident as the math that failed.
Walk us through the specifics of that deal. What happened in Beijing?
This is where the technocrats in Ottawa just fundamentally miscalculated the geopolitical temperature. Mark Carney attempted what he, from his perspective, viewed as a diversification miracle.
Facing an unpredictable administration in Washington, he wanted to, as you said, diversify the menu.
All right, diversify Canada's economic partnerships. So he went to Beijing, and he negotiated a very specific, very high-stakes trade deal. The headline item was a dramatic lowering of tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles entering Canada.
Let's look at the numbers here because the discrepancy is just glaring. The United States currently maintains a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs.
A firewall. It's designed specifically to protect Detroit and the U.S. auto industry.
So what did Carney agree to?
Carney negotiated a drop in Canadian tariffs on those same Chinese EVs to just 6.1%.
100% versus 6.1%.
Think about that delta. It's massive. In exchange, China agreed to lower its tariffs on Canadian canola and lobster.
It looks like a classic quid pro quo. You buy our cars, we buy your agricultural products. From a traditional trade perspective, this makes perfect sense for Canada.
And that's the point. Carney's logic was rooted in the old world, in a concept he called strategic autonomy.
The idea that Canada can't be solely reliant on the US, it needs to build bridges with China, with India.
He thought he was balancing the portfolio, but he failed to account for the landlord's reaction. He was operating under the 1945 rule book, where sovereign nations make their own trade deals. He completely ignored the 2026 reality.
And the reaction from the Oval Office was immediate and hostile. We have a quote circulating from a senior advisor: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
And by attempting to diversify, Trump effectively put Canada on the grill.
But why? Why is a 6.1% tariff in Canada viewed as an existential threat to the United States? It seems disproportionate.
The administration views it as a Trojan horse. You have to look at the logistics of the North American auto industry. It's not two separate industries, it's one deeply integrated system.
Parts cross the border multiple times before cars even finish.
7 or 8 times in some cases. The U.S. fears that the, 49,000 Chinese cars slated to enter Ontario at a 6.1% tariff rate will not stay in Ontario. They will inevitably leak across the border.
This is the leaky sieve theory we've been hearing about.
Precisely. Washington now views Canada not as a sovereign partner, but as a drop-off port, or, even more bluntly, a laundering facility for the Chinese Communist Party.
Laundering.
The belief is that the CCP is using Canada to bypass U.S. protectionism. If a Chinese car comes into Canada at 6.1%, gets a few minor modifications, new tires, a software update, and then tries to enter the U.S. under the old USMCA rules.
It undermines the entire U.S. trade wall.
Completely. But the objection, and you need to understand this, it goes much deeper than just protecting Ford or GM. There's a critical security dimension to these vehicles that is often overlooked.
We're talking about the Internet of Things.
We're talking about a data collection device on wheels. A modern electric vehicle is not just a car. It's packed with LiDAR sensors, cameras, microphones, GPS tracking.
Yeah.
The software is constantly communicating with servers.
And if those servers are in Beijing...
Exactly. The Trump administration argues that allowing Chinese technology capable of mapping roads, recording conversations, monitoring traffic patterns, to sit just miles from the U.S. industrial heartland in Detroit presents an unacceptable security risk.
So it's about data sovereignty.
It is. They view a BYD vehicle parked in Windsor, Ontario, as a potential surveillance asset of the People's Liberation Army.
Okay, so because of this perceived betrayal, this Trojan horse, the U.S. has deployed the weapon, the trade bazooka. We're analyzing the threat of the death tariff and a simultaneous campaign of psychological warfare. Let's start with the tariff itself.
The threat that was issued is a 100% tariff on every Canadian product entering the United States.
Not just cars.
Not just cars, everything. Lumber, oil, steel, aluminum, maple syrup, wheat, you name it. This is an economic death warrant.
Let's contextualize the scale of this for you, the listener. Canada exports roughly 75% of all its goods to the United States.
Correct. The entire Canadian economy is structurally designed to feed the American market. If you place a 100% tariff on those goods, you're not just raising prices.
You're liquidating the economy.
You're liquidating it. Supply chains would snap instantly. Factories in Ontario and Quebec, they would close within days. It is a scorched earth blockade designed for one thing: immediate capitulation.
There's a specific negotiation tactic at play here. Wall Street analysts have even coined a term for it: the taco strategy. Taco.
Trump always comes off.
Explain the mechanics of this strategy. How does it work?
It's the art of the anchor. In any negotiation, the person who sets the first number defines the reality of the situation. Trump's tactic is to anchor the negotiation at a terrifying, catastrophic number. In this case, 100%.
And that shifts the entire window of discourse.
It does. The media, the opposing negotiators, they spend all their energy, all their political capital just discussing the 9%.
So it's a form of psychological manipulation.
Completely. So that when the U.S. eventually offers a concession, perhaps they lower the tariff to, say, 25%, or demand a complete surrender of regulatory autonomy in exchange for zero tariffs, the victim feels a sense of relief.
They feel like they've won a victory.
They feel they've won simply by avoiding the death blow. The goal is to force Canada to accept terms that would have been unthinkable just a week ago by making the alternative total, absolute destruction.
And parallel to this economic threat, there is the personal delegitimization of the Canadian leadership. We need to discuss the governor label.
Yes, this is highly significant and it's entirely deliberate. Trump has taken to referring to Mark Carney in public, in tweets and official statements as Governor Carney.
He's not using the title Prime Minister.
No, or head of government or any national honorific. He uses the title of a subordinate regional administrator.
Governor implies a state within a union.
It's a deliberate deconstruction of status. It reframes the entire relationship, not as nation to nation, but as federal to state. It is, in effect, a constitutional crisis delivered in the form of a tweet.
So by stripping Carney of his sovereign title in the public sphere,
the Oval Office is signaling to the entire world that Canada is no longer viewed as a sovereign country. It is viewed as a territory, subordinate to federal U.S. command.
It's a delegitimization campaign. If the markets and foreign leaders begin to view Carney as merely a governor, it validates the entire concept of regulatory annexation.
It prepares the global consciousness. It socializes the idea. If you call him a governor for 6 months and then you move to integrate the energy grids, nobody is surprised. It normalizes the hierarchy where the real decisions for Canada are being made in Washington.
Which brings us directly to the strategic objective. Why go to these lengths? Why risk alienating a friendly neighbor, your biggest trading partner? The intelligence suggests the real prize isn't trade at all.
Correct. The real prize is the Arctic.
We're moving from trade to defense. This is the Golden Dome project. Our sources indicate the Trump administration is pushing for a massive, space-based, high-tech missile defense shield.
A shield over Greenland and the entire Arctic perimeter.
Explain the necessity of this shield from their perspective.
It's a direct response to the evolution of hypersonic missiles from Russia and China. The polar route is the shortest, most direct path for an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM, to strike the United States.
And current defenses are considered outdated.
Completely outdated against hypersonic glide vehicles. A golden dome, a dense layer of sensors and interceptors over the Arctic, is the cornerstone of the Fortress America doctrine.
But defense costs money, and this is where the global landlord concept comes back in.
Pay-to-play security. The U.S. demand is that Canada must pay a security tax, or contribute direct, massive funding to support this shield. The narrative from the White House is that Canada has been a free rider on U.S. security for decades.
The argument being, and we've heard this phrasing, Canada lives because of the United States.
Exactly. And the ultimatum is stark. You cannot do business with China, the very threat against which the shield is being built, and then expect the U.S. to pay for your protection. The U.S. is saying, if you want to live under the dome, you pay the rent.
This tension spilled over into a very specific diplomatic humiliation recently regarding the Board of Peace.
Yes. Canada was originally invited to sit on the Board of Peace, which is a reconstruction council for Gaza. Then, very abruptly, that invitation was revoked.
What was the reason given?
The leaked intelligence suggests it was about an entry fee. Reports indicate a demand was made for a $1 billion participation fee. The U.S. effectively put a price tag on a diplomatic seat at the table.
$1 billion. And Carney refused.
Carney's defiance was notable. His public statement was, "Canada thrives because we are Canadian." He refused to pay the fee, framing it publicly as extortion.
But this refusal may have accelerated the timeline for something else, something we're calling the Manifest Destiny Memo.
That's our assessment. We're hearing rumors from the Eurasia Group, from contacts within the Pentagon, regarding this document. It seems to be the blueprint for everything we're discussing right now.
What is the Manifest Destiny Memo?
It is a classified strategy document, roughly 40 pages long.
Okay.
And it's been circulating in very high-level defense and trade circles. It outlines a detailed roadmap for regulatory annexation by the year 2027.
2027. That's essentially tomorrow in geopolitical terms.
Yeah.
What does the memo actually propose? Is it a military plan?
You know. And this is crucial for you to understand. The plan does not call for a military invasion. There will be no tanks rolling down Yonge Street in Toronto.
So how does it work?
It proposes the erasure of sovereignty through bureaucratic integration. It calls for the integration of command structures, the creation of a unified North American command for everything from defense to energy to resources.
This would completely redefine how resources are categorized.
Completely. The memo suggests treating Canadian freshwater reserves, timber, oil, critical minerals like lithium and cobalt, not as foreign imports,
That as well.
as U.S. strategic assets.
So under this plan, a freshwater reservoir in British Columbia is viewed legally the same way as a reservoir in Nevada.
Under a unified command structure, yes. The Fortress America doctrine argues that to compete with a rising China, North America must act as a single, unified entity. One border, one decision-making center.
And that center is Washington.
And that center is Washington, the governor title we just discussed. That's the first step in socializing this unification. The memo provides the legal and regulatory framework to make it permanent.
A takeover of this magnitude, however, it doesn't happen without resistance. We must now discuss Section 6, the counterstrike. Canada is a smaller power, but it is not without leverage.
No, it's not.
So how does a mouse fight a giant?
Asymmetric warfare.
Yeah.
When a smaller power fights a superpower, it cannot win on the battlefield. It cannot win in a direct trade war. It has to find the single pressure point that causes unacceptable pain to the giant.
And that pressure point is the darkness doctrine.
It is. And this threat has moved from theory to reality very, very quickly. Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Carney administration have both signaled they are prepared to use their energy infrastructure as a weapon.
And the data supports this threat.
The data is undeniable. Canada provides roughly 21% of the electricity supply for key states like New York, Michigan, and Vermont. The hydropower transmission from Quebec and Ontario, it's the lifeblood of the U.S. Northeast grid. The interconnections are physical and immediate.
So the threat is brutally simple. Flipping the switch.
If the U.S. triggers the death tariff at midnight, preventing Canadian goods from crossing south, Canada cuts the power lines, preventing electricity from flowing south.
And what would be the impact of that move?
Catastrophic. We're looking at immediate spikes in gas and electricity prices. We're talking about rolling blackouts across the entire eastern seaboard. Subways in New York could grind to a halt. Hospitals would be on backup generators. Industrial collapse in states that are absolutely vital to the U.S. economy.
This sounds like mutually assured destruction.
It is. It's the nuclear option of trade policy. One side loses its money, the Canadian economy is liquidated by tariffs, the other side loses its light, the US Northeast goes dark. It's a high-stakes game of chicken, and neither side is blinking.
The standoff is defined by two completely opposing narratives. How does Trump and the White House view this threat?
Trump views it as energy blackmail. For the architects in the White House, this threat is just further proof that the grid is a national security liability. It validates their argument.
Their argument that the grid must be federalized.
Or annexed. They will argue, we cannot let a foreign governor turn off the lights in Manhattan. It becomes a justification for the takeover.
In Carney's view.
His view is sovereignty or silence. He's betting that the domestic pressure on Trump, the political anger of voters sitting in the dark in swing states, will force the U.S. to blink first.
The fallout is already visible right now in the markets. We are seeing market chaos and what many are already calling the death of this special relationship.
You could call it economic terrorism in the eyes of the markets. The loonie, the Canadian dollar, is in freefall as we speak. Investors hate uncertainty, and this is maximum uncertainty.
This volatility also acts as a silent tariff.
It does. It destroys the purchasing power of the Canadian middle class. Your pension, if you're in Canada, is worth less today than it was yesterday. Your savings are being devalued in real time.
And capital flight is accelerating.
Investors are fleeing Canadian assets. If you're a global fund manager, why would you invest in a country that might be annexed or liquidated by its neighbor? You wouldn't. You'd move your capital to the global landlord, to the US.
So ironically, the instability in Canada actually feeds the strength of the US economy.
In a cruel twist, yes. The chaos reinforces the strength of the US dollar and the US market as the only safe harbor left in North America.
Diplomatic analysts from the Washington Post to the Indian Express, they seem to be aligned on this. The special relationship is dead.
The trust that held the continent together for 150 years has evaporated. It's gone. Evaporated in the span of 60 minutes. A relationship requires a shared language, a shared understanding of the rules.
And there is no shared language between the architects and the technocrats?
None. One is playing 4D chess with game theory. The other is reading from a rule book that has been set on fire.
Carney is attempting a pivot. We're seeing reports he's trying to rally G7 allies, specifically France and the UK, for sovereignty guarantee. Is this a viable strategy?
It's a desperate Hail Mary. It is highly unlikely to succeed. France and the UK have their own deep domestic issues. They are not going to risk a full-blown trade war with the United States to save Canadian sovereignty.
So Canada is effectively alone.
Alone in this cage match, yes.
So we're in the final analysis now. We are watching a high-stakes game between a superpower employing game theory and a defiant middle power. The choice facing Mark Carney seems binary.
It is. Blink and he becomes a governor, a subordinate in a new North American empire. Or hold the line and risk the complete economic annihilation of his country.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to the 80-year cycle, the game theory implication is, well, it's chilling.
If the 80-year cycle is truly over, then the very concept of allies is obsolete. In this new world order, there are only two categories: vassals and enemies. The 51st State Project is the manifestation of this new reality.
Let's delve deeper into the mechanics of that trade bazooka. It's important for you to understand how this differs from sanctions we've seen in the past.
Yes, traditionally, sanctions are targeted. They aim at specific individuals or maybe one or two industries to change a specific behavior.
A surgical strike.
This death tariff is not a surgical strike, it is a nuclear option. It is a blanket denial of market existence. It effectively unplugs the entire Canadian economy from its life support system.
And this reinforces the global landlord concept we discussed. A landlord doesn't negotiate with a tenant who stops paying rent, they issue an eviction notice.
And in this case, the rent is total unconditional alignment with U.S. foreign policy, particularly against China. That alignment is non-negotiable.
The math that failed in Beijing serves as the perfect case study for that. When Carney negotiated the 6.1% EV tariff, he was operating under the old rules.
The rules where a sovereign nation makes trade deals that benefit its own consumers and producers.
But the U.S. argument, the Trojan horse narrative, is that there is no such thing as a sovereign trade deal when you share a porous 5,000-mile border with a superpower.
Exactly. The U.S. logic is that Canada's trade policy is U.S. trade policy by default because of the integrated nature of the North American supply chain. If Canada lowers the drawbridge for Chinese EVs, the U.S. views it as lowering the drawbridge to Fortress America.
Let's unpack the leaky sieve theory a bit more Is the U.S. concerned purely about the physical cars leaking across the border, or is there a deeper apprehension?
It's both. Physically, preventing transshipment, where a car is imported to Canada and then re-exported to the U.S. to avoid tariffs, is a logistical nightmare without a hard border.
But the deeper apprehension is about the supply chain itself.
It is. It's about the integration of the supply chain. If Canadian auto parts manufacturers start using cheaper Chinese components because of this lower tariff, those components end up in cars assembled in Detroit or Ohio. They end up in American cars.
So the contamination of the supply chain with Chinese technology is the real red line.
Yes. And as we discussed, the security dimension of that technology is paramount. The Trump administration is simply not willing to have a fleet of Chinese sensors operating within the North American security perimeter. It's a non-starter.
And this brings us back to the psychological aspect again, the governor label. We touched on it, but the implications for upcoming G7 summits, for example, are profound.
It creates a diplomatic quarantine around him. If the President of the United States refuses to address you as a head of government, other nations take note. It fundamentally weakens Carney's standing on the global stage.
It signals that to deal with Canada, you must check with Washington first.
It is the ultimate power move. And it dovetails perfectly with the Manifest Destiny memo. If you treat a leader as a governor long enough, the populace, the markets, they might start to believe it.
So the Golden Dome creates a physical manifestation of this new hierarchy. A missile shield is a defensive asset, but it is also a powerful symbol of control.
And control of the Arctic is the next great geopolitical game. As the ice melts, new shipping lanes open. Vast resources become accessible. The U.S. wants to ensure that the North American Arctic is American territory in practice, if not in name.
The demand for a security tax is the financial lock on that control. By forcing Canada to pay for the shield, the U.S. effectively turns the Canadian budget into a line item contributor to the U.S. Department of Defense.
It erodes the independence of the Canadian military. If your defense budget is inextricably tied to U.S. strategic projects, you lose the ability to deploy your own resources for your own national priorities. You cease to have an independent defense policy.
Okay, let's pivot back to the darkness doctrine. The energy weapon. Is this a credible threat or is it a bluff?
Oh, it is an entirely credible threat, with severe consequences for both sides. The infrastructure is there. The interconnectors exist. Physically, the flow of power can be stopped with the flip of a few switches.
But the political cost for Carney would be immense. I mean, cutting power to hospitals and homes in the U.S.
It would be seen as an act of war in all but name. However, if the Canadian economy is already dead due to a 100% tariff, the strategic calculation changes entirely.
When you have nothing left to lose,
Then mutually assured destruction becomes a viable, rational strategy. It's the only card left to play.
it effectively forces the U.S. to decide, is the death tariff worth the blackout?
That is the gamble. Carney is betting that the domestic political pressure on Trump from blackouts in New York, Michigan, and Vermont would force a retreat on the tariffs.
But Trump might just double down. He might use the blackout as the ultimate justification for seizing control of the grid.
And that is the terrifying risk. Energy blackmail could become the pretext for the very annexation Carney is trying to prevent. It validates the manifest destiny argument that the North American energy grid is too important to be left in the hands of a foreign governor.
The Board of Peace humiliation adds a layer of personal animosity to this structural conflict. That $1 billion fee.
It strips away the entire veneer of shared values. It states very clearly, we are not partners in peace, we are partners in business. If you don't pay, you don't play. It's purely transactional.
This transactional approach is the hallmark of the global landlord doctrine.
And it leaves the technocrats in Ottawa reeling. They come prepared to discuss treaties, humanitarian obligations, international law. They're not prepared to haggle over an entry fee for a peace conference. The disconnect is total.
The economic fallout, the capital flight, is the immediate barometer of this diplomatic death. Money hates uncertainty and it flees from it.
And right now, Canada is the textbook definition of geopolitical uncertainty. This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The pressure creates the economic collapse, which then justifies the takeover to restore stability.
Let's return to the timeline. 2027. That is remarkably close.
In geopolitical terms, it is tomorrow. The Manifest Destiny memo suggests that the administration is not waiting. They are moving with incredible speed to lock in these structural changes before any political winds can shift.
This urgency suggests they see a window of opportunity that might be closing.
The 80-year cycle theory suggests that when an old order collapses, there is a chaotic scramble to secure spheres of influence. The U.S. is securing its North American fortress before China can make any further strategic inroads. Canada is the buffer zone.
And the U.S. has decided that it needs to own the buffer zone, not just ally with it.
That's the strategic shift in a nutshell.
This debriefing has laid out the anatomy of a geopolitical takeover. The data is clear, the intent seems clear, the outcome hangs in the balance of this midnight deadline.
The next 24 hours will define the next 50 years of North American history. We are watching a high-stakes game of chicken between a game theory superpower and a defiant middle power.
We will continue to monitor the wire. This has been a deep dive intelligence briefing. We do not deal in optimism, we deal in reality.
And the reality is that the map of the world is being redrawn right now as we speak.
History is being written with a sledgehammer. The lights of New York and the future of Ottawa are hanging by a thread. This is the new reality.
The only question remaining is who holds the pen.
And who holds the switch? End transmission.